Imagine marching through a scorching desert for 3 years, watching your mates die from thirst, starvation, and battle, only to finally reach your destination and realize you don't have enough men, supplies, or even bloody water to finish the job. That was the reality facing 13,000 Crusaders when they arrived at Jerusalem on the 7th of June. 1999, what happened next was one of the most brutal and dramatic sieges in medieval history, and it all came down to a race against time, because a massive relief army was heading their way. Main content. Let's set the scene properly. It's 1095, and Pope Urban II has just delivered what might be the most successful speech in history. He's calling for a crusade, a holy war, to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control and help the Byzantine Emperor Alexios recover lost territories. The response, absolutely massive. Thousands upon thousands of Europeans from all walks of life decide to march thousands of miles to the Holy Land. Fast forward for years. The journey has been an absolute nightmare. The Crusaders have been fighting amongst themselves almost as much as they've been fighting Muslims. They've endured scorching heat, freezing winters, disease, starvation, and battles that decimated their numbers. But somehow, they've persevered. And now they're finally standing before the walls of Jerusalem. The Christian army is led by a proper who's who of European nobility. You've got Raymond IV, Count of Toulouse, one of the richest and most powerful nobles in France. There's Robert II of Normandy, William the Conqueror's eldest son. Count Robert II of Flanders is there as well, along with a famous Norman knight named But the man in overall command is Godfrey of Bouillon, who's about to lead what he hopes will be the crowning achievement of the entire crusade. The army, beneath their banners, numbers around 13,000 men. But here's the kicker. Only 1,500 of them are mounted knights. The rest are infantry. And after years of campaigning, they're absolutely knackered, hungry, thirsty, and worn down by the brutal conditions. Now, whilst the Crusaders are setting up camp and preparing for a siege, the defenders are watching from atop Jerusalem's walls. The city is under the control of Iftikhar Adola, the Fatimid governor, and this chap is no fool. He's seen them coming, and he's prepared thoroughly. Adola has stockpiled massive amounts of supplies. He's rallied a formidable garrison of Arab and Sudanese troops. The walls are strong, the defenses are solid, and he's got one more nasty trick up his sleeve. He's poisoned all the wells surrounding the city, every single one. Think about that for a moment. You're a Crusader who has just marched through the desert to reach Jerusalem, and now you discover that the nearest source of clean water is over 6 miles away, in the scorching Palestinian sun. And just to make matters worse, their SA-400 strong force of Muslim cavalry whose entire job is to harass anyone trying to fetch water. It's absolutely brutal. Godfrey of Bouillon quickly realizes he's got a proper problem on his hands. He doesn't have enough men or supplies to simply starve the Muslims out. The defenders are better prepared, better supplied, and sitting pretty behind massive stone walls. If the Crusaders are going to take Jerusalem, they need to do it quickly and by force. The ravines running along the eastern and western walls make attacking from those directions impossible. So the Crusaders split their forces. Raymond IV sets up camp to the south, whilst the bulk of the army prepares to assault the northern wall. On the 13th of June, barely a week after arriving, the Crusaders launched their first assault. They pushed their ladders forward toward the northern wall, whilst Fatimid archers rained down arrows from the battlements. It's absolutely hellish. The Crusaders have to climb these ladders whilst being shot at from above. And as you can imagine, it doesn't go well. By the end of the day, despite tremendous effort and courage, the walls remain unbreached. Not a single Crusader has made it over. Worse still, they've used up most of their limited wood supplies building those ladders. And the Fatimids had already stripped the surrounding area of trees before they arrived. Without materials for building siege engines, the assault grinds to a complete halt. The Crusaders desperately need to find wood, rope, anything they can use to build proper siege equipment. But searching for supplies in hostile territory, whilst being constantly attacked by cavalry, is a nightmare. Then, 4 days later on the 17th of June, fortune finally smiles on the Crusaders. News arrives that a small Christian fleet has docked at Jaffa, a port city not far from Jerusalem. The ships are carrying supplies, including the precious materials needed for siege engines. Brilliant news, Right. Well, not quite yet. Several well-armed convoys of Crusaders set off for Jaffa to collect the supplies, but the road is treacherous, and the Fatimid cavalry are waiting. They ambush the exhausted, thirsty Crusaders, and absolute chaos breaks out. The skirmish is fierce and bloody, but eventually, more Christian reinforcements arrive and drive off the Muslim riders. The convoy finally reaches Jaffa and loads up the supplies. They even scavenge wood from the ships themselves when a Muslim fleet arrives and blocks the port. Every plank, every beam is precious. They haul everything back to Jerusalem. And at last, the Crusaders have what they need to build proper siege engines. They construct a battering ram and 2 massive siege towers. One tower goes to the southern side under Raymond IV's command, whilst the other heads to the northern wall under Godfrey of Orleans. These towers are engineering marvels, really. Multi-story wooden structures that can be wheeled up to the walls, allowing attackers to fight the defenders at eye level. But as construction progresses, conditions in the siege camps are deteriorating rapidly. Animals and men are dying from dehydration. The heat is unbearable. And to make matters worse, news arrives that a massive Fatimid relief army is marching toward Jerusalem. The Crusaders realize they're in a race against time. They need to take the city before that relief army arrives. Because if they get caught between the city garrison and a fresh army, they're absolutely done for. On the 13th of July, exactly 1 month after their first failed assault, the Crusaders form up for their final push. Raymond IV commands the southern forces, whilst Godfrey of Bouillon leads the main assault in the north. The plan is simple: attack from 2 directions simultaneously, forcing the defenders to split their forces and thin out their defenses. The Fatimids haven't been idle either. They've positioned mangonels, medieval artillery, both on the walls and in the streets to bring down the siege towers. They've erected barricades and barriers outside the northern wall to block the approach. If those towers fall, the Crusaders are finished. They don't have the materials to build new ones. The assault begins. The battering ram on the northern wall lurches forward and starts smashing through the barriers. The men pushing it are protected by archers who trade volleys with the defenders on the walls. Behind the ram comes the massive siege tower, moving at an agonizingly slow pace. It takes tremendous effort and manpower to operate, and every inch forward is hard-won. Fatimid archers unleash volley after volley of flaming arrows, desperately trying to set the ram ablaze. Muslim skirmishers launch ambushes from outside the walls. The fighting is absolutely savage, but the Crusaders manage to fend off these attacks whilst continuing to push their equipment forward. Meanwhile, in the south, Raymond IV's forces are having their own struggles. For 2 more days, the brutal struggle continues. Finally, on the 3rd day, the battering ram tears down the last of the Fatimid barricades. But there's a problem. The ram is now stuck in a position where it can't be quickly moved, blocking the path for the siege tower. Now, here's where things get properly bizarre. The Crusaders, who've spent 2 days defending the ram from fire, now need to burn it themselves to clear the path. Meanwhile, the Fatimids, who've spent 2 days trying to burn it, are now desperately throwing water on it to keep it intact because it's blocking the tower. It's almost comical if it weren't so deadly serious. Eventually, the ram is reduced to ashes, and the smoking siege tower continues its advance toward the northern wall. Flaming arrows keep coming, but the tower presses on. When it finally reaches the wall and locks into position, the real fighting begins. The tower's drawbridge slams down onto the battlements, and Crusaders pour onto the walls. More siege ladders are pushed up against other sections, and waves of Normans and Franks swarm the Fatimid defenses. The fighting on the ramparts is absolutely brutal. Hand-to-hand combat, in the most literal sense. But the sheer weight of numbers begins to tell. The Crusaders gain control of the walls and start flooding into the city en masse. At this point, the Fatimid defense disintegrates. The garrison breaks and flees, and what follows is one of the darkest moments of the entire crusade. The massacre that ensued was so horrific that even Western Christian sources, which are generally sympathetic to the Crusaders, describe it as barbaric. Contemporary historians estimate around 40,000 casualties. Men, women, children, Muslims, Jews, all were slaughtered indiscriminately. The streets literally ran with blood. It's a tragic and sobering reminder that war, especially medieval holy war, was utterly brutal, and that victory often came at a terrible human cost. Closing, despite the horrific bloodshed, the conquest of Jerusalem was considered a monumental triumph for Christendom. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was established with Godfrey of Bouillon as its ruler, achieving the primary objective of the First Crusade. From that moment, Christianity had a significant foothold in the Holy Land, which would shape the region's history for centuries to come. But let's be honest about what this story really tells us. It's not just about religious conviction or military strategy. It's about human endurance, pushed to its absolute limits. It's about men who marched thousands of miles, endured unimaginable hardships, and faced impossible odds, because they believed their cause was just. Whether you view the Crusades as a holy mission or a tragic chapter of religious violence, the Siege of Jerusalem stands as a testament to both human determination and human capacity for brutality. The Crusaders achieved what many thought impossible, but at a cost that should make us reflect on the price of victory and the true meaning of conquest. The Kingdom of Jerusalem would stand for nearly 2 centuries, but its foundation was laid in blood on those walls in July 1099. And that blood, both Christian and Muslim, tells a story far more complex than simple narratives of good versus evil. If you found this deep dive into medieval history fascinating, share it with anyone who loves learning about the complex realities behind legendary events. Drop a comment below telling us which aspect of the Crusades you'd like us to explore next. And remember, history isn't about picking sides. It's about understanding the full picture, warts and all. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and never forget that behind every great historical event are real people facing impossible choices. Cheers.